Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to take a look at the 2015 core set 2-player Clash Pack for Magic the Gathering. This is also known as Fate and Fury, the Fate deck being green and blue and the Fury deck being red and green. On the back it says Fate and Fury combined for the ultimate weapon, specially created for players who want to up their game and play on the next level. This Clash Pack contains 2 decks ready for you to crack open and battle with a Wrenn. Then take your favorite cards and combine them into a single deck capable of laying down some serious damage at Friday Night Magic. The Clash Pack includes 6 premium cards, 3 per deck, with alternative art not available elsewhere, as well as a deck box big enough for both decks. The contents include 2 ready-to-play 60-card decks, 6 premium cards with alternative art, deck box, strategy insert, and Magic Rules reference card. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. We have a card divider here, the rules reference card. It's pretty standard stuff for the time period in which it was produced, which was for M2015. It was a long time ago, but it feels like just yesterday to me. And this is useful for beginning players, so this could be useful for people who are interested in this particular product. Alright, we have the strategy insert here. It tells you a little bit about building the deck and how to make a better deck, as it were. We have the deck list here for one of the decks, and then some information about sideboards and tournaments and events. On the other side we have strategy on how to play the decks, and I do like that this is actually fairly decent in terms of the amount of information that it gives you in what the deck is trying to do, cards that are important, and mechanics that are important to each particular deck. And then it gives you a deck list for the individual decks. So it looks like the other side is the combined deck that it is trying to be, and then over here is the individual decks that you can play against each other. And again, that's really cool that the product was designed so that you can play these individual decks against each other and then smash them all together and make this theoretically stronger deck that you can play against other people as well. So pretty cool. Here's the deck box that was supposed to be here. It looks like it will only fit 2 unsleeved decks. You might be able to put sleeves on these, but I doubt it that this would take 120 cards that are sleeved. So that is the deck box itself. It was made of cheap cardboard, but it does have the name and some artwork. So there's some, I suppose, value there. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 2 decks. I'm assuming this is Fate because it's got blue in it, and the Prognostic Sphinx. Here's the Fury deck. And those are the 2 decks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sleeve these up, I'll play them against each other, and then I'm going to combine these into a mega deck that is outlined in here, and I will play this against some of the other Clash packs that I have, and I will then be back to let you know what I think of each individual deck and the combined deck. So let's talk about Fate first. Fate has a couple themes in it. The first being flying is one of its themes. Not a surprise given that it's blue. And so that's represented by the Vaporkin, the Hypnotic Sphinx, the Nimbus Naiads, giving everything flying, the Horizon Chimeras, the Prognostic Sphinx, and the Horizon Scholar. And then it also has card draw as its other major theme, and that's represented by the divinations and the Jace's ingenuities. The card draw is also amplified by the presence of Scry, which is available on the Omen Speaker, the Prognostic Sphinx, and the Horizon Scholar. And then there's also a bunch of utility cards that will act as bounce or pseudo removal, or you have the negates to deal with Fury's non-creature spells. And finally, there is the Bestow mechanic, which appears on the Hypnotic Sirens, the Leaf Crown Druids, the Nimbus Naiads, the Thassa's Emissaries. And that allows you to power up your own creatures or steal one of your opponent's creatures. And all this comes together with the Prophet of Kruphix, allowing you to cast any of your creatures at instant speed, and then also giving you a pile of mana, thanks to its untapping on your opponent's turn as well as your own. Making this an interesting deck. It's a little inconsistent because it doesn't have a ton of 4-ofs, and some of the deck is certainly designed to interact specifically with Fury as opposed to anything else. The Leaf Crown Dryad is perhaps kind of the weirdest inclusion because it's not like Fury has a ton of flyers or anything like that, and so that's probably the strangest inclusion that I would have probably traded out for either more Nimbus Naiads or something else instead of the Leaf Crown Dryads. But overall, I think the deck does lean towards its theme. It doesn't feel that powerful. It's definitely along the lines of a standard pre-con deck, and it would be more powerful if it just had a little bit more consistency in its cards. It has a small ramp package to get towards its top level cards with the Kira's followers. But I guess it plays fine for what it is, and if you like to draw cards and or fly over your opponent, then this is not a bad option for you to pick when deciding to play Fate and Fury with another player. And here is Fury. Fury is very clearly a ramp-oriented deck. We have 4 Elvish Mystics, 2 Voyaging Satyrs. We have the Nykthos that the Satyrs can untap. Generator Servants to get you into the bigger cards as well. And then there is also a Devotion theme, which the Karametra's Acolyte adds additional ramp power to. And with all that mana that you're generating, the biggest mana sink, besides just casting your big creatures, is the Monstrosity mechanic, which appears on the Ill-Tempered Cyclopses, the Arbor Colossus, the Hydra Broodmaster, and then you also have some Devotion payoffs with the Nylea's Disciples getting you a bunch of life, and the Nykthos giving you a ton of mana, which again you can channel into a lot of these things, including the Genesis Hydra and the Hydra Broodmaster, which have X abilities here. There are some weird parts of this deck. For example, there are a number of cards that are here just to deal with what Fate is doing. So the Plummets deal with Fate's flyers, and then you have the very expensive 8-mana Boulder Fall, which I guess is supposed to be a mana sink, which will hopefully let you split up that mana between a number of your opponent's creatures to take them out. But by the time that you're doing that, I think all 5 mana is going to be targeted towards just one creature that is flying, probably some big fat creature. And not everything in this deck, despite having the Devotion mechanic, for example, the Nylea's Disciple, really lends itself towards a very particular game plan. The deck also is a little uneven because it doesn't have consistency in its rares. The deck could really use more Courses of Kruphix, for example, and better payoffs. The Nemesis of Mortals is a very weak payoff for this deck because it doesn't really have a natural way of putting its own creatures into the graveyard, and so it's really just ramping towards the 6-mana card, and that you will need the extra mana in order to monstrosity that thing. And so I think that this deck does play fine, especially with the Fate deck as its opponent, because the decks are designed to interact with each other. The Reclamation Sage should be able to blow up Fate's enchantment creatures, for example. And I think if you like ramping into big payoffs, then this is a reasonable deck. I think it could be more consistent and a little bit more enjoyable if the payoffs were just a bit more impressive, like the one-ofs of the rares that exist in this deck. This is the combined Fate and Fury deck, and it largely grabs the ramp package of Fury and blends it with a bit of the card draw of Fate. It leans a bit more into Fury than Fate, as you can see from the high amount of ramp, and then the deck obviously builds towards having a ton of ramp cards, and then nothing in the middle, and then a giant amount of payoffs here. Now that does mean that the deck is a little susceptible to being hosed by the random number god putting the wrong cards in the wrong order. And so you will have to try to mulligan to make sure that you get your ramp cards early. Like a lot of these precons, the deck is also hamstrung quite a bit by the rare limit to the deck. The Nemesis Immortals are a poor substitute for the Hydra Broodmaster and the Genesis Hydra, especially since there's no automatic way of dumping your creatures into the graveyard, so they have to die for the Nemesis Immortals to get cheaper. Now, I'm sure that the deck is hoping just to ramp into playing them, but they're a pretty poor reward. The other cards are moderate rewards. The Nesting Game Warden can possibly draw you another card, but there's no real way of getting a lot of lands ramped onto the battlefield except for Font of Fertility and maybe the Courser of Kruphix. So your odds of getting a lot of forests to be able to dig in deep to get exactly what you need is a little harder there. The Prophet of Kruphix is nice, excellent card that was a major player in Standard at the time. And then you have some big weird cards here like the Arbor Colossus, which is strong, but it also is a destroyer of flyers, which is kind of a weird monstrosity effect to have on the main deck. A lot of the blue cards seem to be about card draw. You have Divinations and Jace's Ingenuity. Your interaction comes from Aether Spouts and Curse of the Swine, as well as Fated Intervention. Otherwise, you're just kind of trying to ramp in and get a ton of mana and play a bunch of big things and then get out there for the win. I think that the deck does have the capacity to snowball, and there are some strong options in it, but again, the lack of consistency does make the deck a bit weaker. And the inclusion of blue in a devotion-y oriented deck does also make the deck weaker, especially the double blue pips on many of the blue spells here. The sideboard does have a variety of toolbox options. You have Nylea's Disciples to deal with aggro, Reclamation Sage to deal with enchantments and artifacts. You have Plummets to deal with flyers, Griptide as general creature interaction, as well as Pin to the Earth. Probably the weakest of the sideboard cards there. Negate is a good way to deal with control decks and other decks that are trying to use spells to deal with your cards here. The mana base is also obviously weak. The deck really needs more Temples of Mysteries and Nykthoses to make this really shine, but there's only one of each, and the rare limit is really hurting this deck. We could also use more Coursers of Kruphix here. The Horizon Chimeras, you can take it or leave it. They're not really doing a lot for this deck, as well as the Arbor Colossus, the Prognostic Sphinx, the Nesting Game Warden. There's a lot of weak cards in this deck that can be improved upon, but as a smashing of the two decks together, I don't think that this deck is going to win much at Friday Night Magic, but I think in Kitchen Table Game, I think that you'll see it do quite a few impressive things from time to time when the deck's variance, with only having one of each of its rares, can lean a little bit more towards a stronger showing. So what do I think about the two-player Clash Pack overall? I think that there are some really good things going on with this particular product, specifically that you can buy this and just play against each other right out of the box with decks that were, at least at the time, legal in Standard, and so you didn't have the problem with dual decks where you couldn't take them and play them against other people in a Standard tournament. Unfortunately, the problem with trying to play these decks in Standard at Friday Night Magic is that each of these individual decks really don't stand a chance against any type of meta deck or even just more optimized kitchen table builds. And so that is one of the weaknesses. But one of the interesting things that this deck does, that the dual decks also do, is that these two decks are designed to counterbalance each other so that there are cards in each deck that can counter what the other deck is trying to do. For example, there are a lot of enchantments in Fate, which the Reclamation Sages in Fury can deal with, and then Fate has a number of bounce effects that can really just slow down Fury's big, expensive spells, as well as just stealing things with the Hypnotic Siren, for example. And so the interaction between the decks is pretty smart, and I think that one of the things that it ends up benefiting quite well is that the design of these two decks also lends to the combined deck, which is admittedly still well below the par of Friday Night Magic, but a fairly strong kitchen table deck that has a complete sideboard, and the cards that are meant to interact with each other in these two decks actually turn out to be a reasonable sideboard for general purpose toolboxing against a variety of types of decks that you might encounter in this particular format. Now, it's not to say that the Future League really foresaw what the meta was going to look like, and so this deck probably wouldn't really be able to stand up even at Friday Night Magic to anything that you're going to encounter at Friday Night Magic. So I think some of the advertising of the box is incorrect here. Ultimately, I think that this is still a pretty enjoyable product because you can take the box, play it with two people, and then you can combine the parts to make an even stronger deck that you can again play at Kitchen Table Magic with other players, and you even have a sideboard there so you can adapt to what your opponents are trying to do and learn a little bit how to build a better deck as a result of it. So the instructions are really helpful for that, and I think that this product is a really good idea, but a casual idea as well. And I think that one of the things that could really improve this product is just putting more consistency into the decks, especially increasing the number of rares so that the decks are more consistent both in themselves and when they are combined. Now, I know that Wizards doesn't like doing that with their precons, but later precons, as we have seen with Challenger decks, are actually able to do that. And so I do lament the loss of the Clash packs, which didn't last too long, but I appreciate what they were trying to do. And this one is a modestly fun one that can go wild with some of the mana generation that it offers. And so that is my thoughts about the 2015 core set 2-player Clash pack. If you have any experience with this product, let us know what you think of it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This is Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.